What we are trying to do today is start a dialogue. And we are telling the public and the policymakers and the governments that there is another alternative to call in your generals and or military and say go and attack there. There are other ways to solve disputes in the world, like dialogue, diplomacy, and sorting things out. That should be the first option, and also the last. There is no need to resort to military action. 6:30 we're going to start. In 5 minutes. Hello. Hello, good to see you.
I don't think Pluto generally is a radical publisher. We publish books in the historical radical tradition, and there's never been a moment in time when this tradition is more important than it is now.
Okay, thank you. The book is about the obsession of the US, their warmongering and their military spending, which has created a monster, what we call the military-industrial complex. It has been the cause of the extreme poverty in the world, 9/11, and the market crash of 2008. Let me start by saying that I'm so pleased to see so many dedicated change makers in this room who want to make a difference in this world. My book proposes that we should shift from war economy to peace economy and join together all nations, individuals, to fight our common enemies, which is warmongering, extreme poverty, and climate change. I argue that the military-industrial complex has handed power to that 1% of the elite whose material desires can never be satisfied, who murder, torture, and steal in exchange for billions in Swiss bank account or for a 4th yacht or a 10th palace. And Al-Qaeda is the manifestation of anger and humiliation of people living under puppet regimes. The message is simple. No to the military-industrial complex and yes to the well-being of all. No to extreme poverty and yes to economic equality. No to weapons and violence, yes to peace and safer world. I say there is no need for global military spending, which is all-time high at 1.6 trillion in 2010. There is no need for military-industrial complex to look for excuses to continue perpetual wars. What we do require is a change from war economy to peace economy in which world powers can choose to cooperate and focus on 4 Ds: disarmament, demilitarization, development, and democracy. Today's book launch is an opportunity to move forward the debate against the military mindset, to start and activate a political discussion to change the system for peace and prosperity. Thank you very much.
First of all, why is it such an appropriate time? We're in a nightmare. We have the prospect of an accelerating arms race in the Middle East, with all the acute, dangerous consequences that could flow from that. One of my reflections, and why I think this book is so badly needed and why it's so important and so well written, is when I look back on my life, I had a spell, and the chairlady was kind enough not to refer to this, but actually I started government in the Ministry of Defence. And I remember being absolutely flabbergasted when I went to an arms exhibition once and saying, my God, look at all the research, resources that are going in to produce these weapons. If the same effort and drive and imagination and resources were going into our normal, or what should be normal, industrial production in Britain, how much stronger our economy would be. But the other thing which has come across to me in my experience in overseas development and foreign policy and the rest is the cost of conflict. It just does not make sense. How do we want our civilization to be judged in history? A society that was wrapped up in the means of destroying life, or a society completely committed to the concept of enhancing human dignity, enhancing life? There is so much to discuss. I wish I could hear the others. I just want to say to Vijay, congratulations, and I hope the book is just immensely widely read.
Thank you.
War on Want was founded very much on the same principle of linking up the challenge of fighting militarism with the challenge of fighting for development around the world. So that link between economics and militarism, between war and development, is absolutely crucial, I think. And I think, again, what's really good about the book, and this comes towards the end of the book, is that it says very clearly that you cannot have any form of peaceful, sustainable future based on the intervention of countries like the US or the UK or as a whole NATO. And this idea that NATO has suddenly become a benign force that could replace the United Nations or something is very well dealt with in the book. To say that that is absolutely not the case at all. We cannot consider NATO and its interventions to be anything but imperialism by design. And that, I think, is why we're in such a really difficult situation now with what we're seeing in Syria. Because the whole principle of humanitarian intervention, the responsibility to protect, which the international community took on itself after the genocides in Rwanda, in Bosnia and Kosovo, that has now been torpedoed as a concept. Because you can't have humanitarian intervention when it's self-interested, imperialist intervention by NATO. And so suddenly you're not left with anything you can actually call in terms of civil policing or international response. And that, I think, has been one of the greatest sadnesses of what we've seen in interventions, whether it's been Libya, whether it's been Afghanistan, whether it's been Iraq, go back to Somalia, go back to Vietnam, go back to the British Empire. And I think that, again, is where the book is absolutely great in pointing out that the future has got to be different from that. The future has got to be based on the United Nations. It's got to be based on a system in which we can have legitimate belief. So I would congratulate everybody who's been involved in the book. I congratulate Vijay, obviously, but also James and also Pluto Press for publishing it. It's a really important statement of the links between militarism and economics and the threat of war which hangs behind global capitalism. So I think everybody should have a copy and at least get one for their friends as well. Thank you.
The first thing I'd say about doing the research for this book for Vijay was that it was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. This was not because Vijay, who is delightful as anyone here knows. It was because 2011 was possibly the most difficult year in modern history to write a book about international relations. Actually, we are now in an age of crisis. And one of the absolute principal causes of these crises is the welfare, the dole that our governments hand out to military companies, military contractors, inflating this mega bubble in the military sector so that we can say we've got the best kit, so we can go into Saudi Arabia or Jordan or formerly Libya, and again soon to be Libya, and sell them this stuff in exchange for what they give us back. We need to develop a productive manufacturing capacity and not a destructive one. And with that, I will hand over to the Q&A. But I hope everybody does get a chance to read the book, and I hope they enjoy it.
Congratulations to Vijay. I want to be very specific, pointing the finger on a global private cartel, banking and financial cartel, who have hijacked, quote unquote, the money supply.
I'm not an economist and I don't pretend to be one. But all I know is when the bankers are losing money, they are bailed out. If I've got a corner shop or I've got a business running, if I can't make it pay, I have to go down. So that shows how much dependent our whole industrial base, our whole economy, our whole system is totally dependent on the bankers.
I would agree, but up to a point. I think that it's not just about finance here, because finance, while it stands behind a lot of the capitalist enterprise, the big shift in the last 30, 40 years has been that all capital has become financialized. So I think it's wrong for us just to think that if we sort out the streams of finance and we sort out the banks, we'll have sorted out the problem. You'll have sorted out a bit of the problem, but actually there's a much broader systemic problem behind that, which is the problem of capital as itself.
When I read the book, I phoned up with Jane and said, I'm absolutely astonished by this book. And I think my astonishment is partly because it is packed with the kind of information we don't usually find all together. You may find some of these bits and pieces of information in a magazine here, a newspaper, but have it all together within one book is really quite a remarkable achievement. The extent of the research is really quite extraordinary. I mean, the range of the research. I mean, how many books today really get to grips with the issue of the significance of China in world affairs? This book, I think, is part of a way of saying, let's see the world in a new way. Don't let's be conditioned by the imposed BBC agenda.
One quick question is, how do we deal with the media blackout? What we cannot rely on at all is the BBC or ITV, and yet we are paying for this mediocre journalism.
Now, I'm standing here and I've got £100 million in my back pocket, not to give to one of the organisations that are involved in dealing with many of the issues that around it, but on the basic issue, which is what the book is about, on transferring money from the military into development and the other two aspects of the 4D. What do I do with that money to get the best return?
Nelson Mandela made the comment or wrote about this, saying that you don't make peace by talking to your friends, you've got to make peace with your enemies. And I'd like one of the panelists maybe to comment on some ideas and thoughts on how do you engage people who disagree with you, because we have to make peace with people who don't agree with us.
There is a growing swell of opinion which will eventually come to 99% saying, we will tell the 1% that we've had enough of the war fighting, we've had enough of the killing, we've had enough of hunger and poverty when there's quite enough wealth in the world to feed all the world's children. Now is the time to tell the governments of the world, unless you do what is right, we will kick you out and elect fresh people. Unless we move towards peace, we will reject you as the people of war, because the time for peace has come.
Never ever think we are not making a difference. We are making a difference. Sometimes, like the Iraq war, there were 15 million people in the streets of not just UK, all over the world. I'm actually quite inspired by this today's meeting, that not all is lost. We have explored all the issues in the books and others, and we have, in a small way, we have started a dialogue, a debate to change the system, and believe me, we are doing fine and we'll be winning. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carl. Okay, have some drinks outside. Oh, hello.
I think there's a massive upsurge in energy at the moment, real interest in trying to find ways to combat the different crises of capitalism, and that's shown whether it's in the publications or in people's new readings or in the mass actions that are taking place across the world. You know, the Occupy movement wasn't just Wall Street and London, it's in hundreds of cities around the world that people are rising up to challenge the powers that have got us into the mess that we're in. So I think there's a lot of cause to be optimistic for the future, because there is this groundswell of public anger that we've been forced into a position which nobody wants. It's the 99% calling on the 1% and saying, you've got to get out the way, there's an entirely new tide coming. So I think, yeah, Vijay's book is very much part of a tide of public action and public disaffection with the model that we have at the moment, and long may that continue.
We're very proud of him. He's written a fantastic book. I'm immensely proud of him and what he's written, and it's got such depth and character, and I hope we take back issues that we can pass around the world and promote peace.
I'm very happy that all of you youngsters have come.
बच्चों के साथ 2 new girls रखी है और जब परसों याद दिलाया, oh my god, मैंने oh my god.